Throughout human history, religion has been a powerful force that shapes both our spiritual beliefs and our societal structures. But what if I told you that the very religions many of us follow have also played a significant role in constructing and reinforcing systems of patriarchy, systems where men hold authority and women are often relegated to secondary roles? In her book The Patriarchs, The Origins of Inequality, Angela Saini explores how religious traditions have been intertwined with patriarchal systems. Today, we dive deep into how religion has influenced and perpetuated male dominance across societies. In The Patriarchs, The Origins of Inequality, Angela Saini delves into the relationship between patriarchy and religion, exploring how religious beliefs and institutions have played a pivotal role in shaping and reinforcing patriarchal systems. This section of the book offers a critical lens on the ways that religion has been both a reflection of and a mechanism for perpetuating gender inequality over centuries. Religious texts and male authority. Saini discusses how many of the foundational religious texts across major world religions have been used to establish and justify male dominance. The Bible, the Quran, and Hindu scriptures such as the Manusmriti all contain passages that reflect and reinforce patriarchal values. For example, in Christianity, women are often portrayed in subservient roles to men, from Eve's creation from Adam's rib in Genesis to the subordination of women in the New Testament. In Islam, while women are granted rights and protection in the Quran, many interpretations and cultural practices have subordinated women, with patriarchal readings of the religious texts influencing societal norms. In Hinduism, the Manusmriti, an ancient law code, prescribes that women should be under the guardianship of men, first their father, then their husband, and finally their sons. Saini points out that these texts were often interpreted and enforced by male religious leaders who solidified male authority as a divine or natural order. This contributed to the idea that male dominance was not just a social norm, but a sacred command. Religion and the gendered division of roles. Religion has often prescribed specific, rigid roles for men and women, relegating women to the private domestic sphere while promoting men as public, political, and spiritual leaders. These religious norms have been institutionalized in various ways. In Christianity, for example, the Catholic Church historically restricted women from holding leadership roles, with the priesthood being a male-dominated domain. The idea of submission within marriage, as outlined in Christian doctrine, reinforced the notion of women's secondary role. In Islam, while the Quran stresses the spiritual equality of men and women, male scholars and patriarchal interpretations of Islamic law, Sharia, often impose strict gender roles. Women were often excluded from public spheres, including leadership and religious positions. There are many countries where they can't study past the age of 11, can't appear in the television, and need a male supervisor in court, otherwise their word means nothing. Most of these women are kept to produce offsprings and treated as domestic slaves, without a voice, without any real protection. In ancient and medieval religious traditions globally, the religious authorities often upheld patriarchy by assigning women a role centered around reproduction, family care, and domestic duties, while men were positioned as providers, warriors, and decision-makers in both the public and spiritual realms. The concept of male divine authority. One of the most striking features of many world religions is the concept of a male deity or male-dominated divine structure. The notion of a singular male god or gods has been prevalent across religions, which further reinforced the idea that male authority was divinely sanctioned. Christianity's God is male, and Jesus is depicted as the ultimate male authority figure. In Judaism, the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, centers on a male God figure, and the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, Jacob are central to the faith's narrative. In ancient religions, many gods were male figures: Zeus in Greek mythology, Odin in Norse mythology. By positioning God as male, these religions not only reinforced male dominance, but also made it difficult to question male authority in earthly governance. Religious figures such as priests were often men, which further reinforced male dominance within the religious hierarchy. Exclusion from religious leadership. Saini highlights how across history, women have been systematically excluded from religious leadership roles. In many religious traditions, women were not allowed to lead congregations, perform key rituals, or hold positions of authority within the religious institutions. In Christianity, the Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches have historically barred women from becoming priests, bishops, or popes, maintaining that the priesthood is a male-only institution. In Judaism, the role of rabbi was traditionally male, though reform movements in recent years have begun to allow women to hold such positions. In Hinduism, although some women could attain spiritual authority as gurus or saints, they were often restricted by social and cultural practices, such as the taboo against women leading temple worship. This exclusion from leadership reinforced the broader societal idea that men were spiritually and intellectually superior, further legitimizing patriarchal control over not just religious but also political and social life. Patriarchy and the spread of religion. Saini also discusses how patriarchal structures were embedded in the spread of religious empires. When religions expanded through conquest, colonization, and missionary work, the spread of patriarchal religious values often accompanied political dominance. For example, European colonial powers brought Christian missionaries to colonized regions, often imposing their patriarchal values on indigenous cultures, even if those cultures had more egalitarian gender norms. In the context of Islam's expansion, while early Islamic societies granted some rights to women, property rights, the ability to work and choose a spouse, the interpretation of Islamic law and its enforcement by male authorities often led to the marginalization of women, particularly in areas under Sharia law. Religious justifications for violence and control. Saini also notes that religion has often been invoked as a justification for violence and control over women, whether through the concept of honor in patriarchal societies or the justification of practices like female genital mutilation, FGM, or forced marriages. In many cases, religious dogma has been used to argue that women's bodies and autonomy should be controlled for the sake of family or societal honor. In Christianity, the concept of women as temptresses, or the biblical notion of Eve's sinfulness, has often been cited to justify women's oppression. In Hinduism, caste systems and practices like dowry were sometimes defended by appeals to religious tradition. In Islam, the practice of purdah, the seclusion of women, and the justification for controlling women's mobility and appearance have sometimes been framed as part of religious devotion. Modern religious reform and gender equality. Despite the historical entanglement of religion with patriarchy, Saini notes the efforts within various religious communities to challenge these gendered structures. Feminist theology and reinterpretation of religious texts have led to more inclusive understandings of gender roles. For example, Christian feminist movements have argued for a more egalitarian reading of the Bible, challenging patriarchal interpretations of marriage, leadership, and female agency. Islamic feminist scholars have called for reinterpreting the Quran in ways that support gender equality and women's rights, such as advocating for women's leadership in mosques or addressing issues like inheritance and polygamy. Hindu women have sought to reclaim spiritual authority within their faith, with some female gurus and spiritual leaders gaining prominence. Conclusion. In her exploration of patriarchy and religion, Saini underscores that religious doctrines and practices have often been wielded as tools for maintaining male dominance, whether through the sacred texts, religious leadership structures, or gendered roles prescribed by religious institutions. However, she also highlights how religious frameworks are not static and have been, and continue to be, contested and reinterpreted in ways that seek to promote gender equality and justice. This critical examination of the historical and ongoing relationship between patriarchy and religion underscores the deep entanglements between belief systems, power structures, and social norms. It also points to the potential for reform and the transformation of religious spaces toward more inclusive and egalitarian models. While the history of patriarchy and religion is one of domination and exclusion, it is also a story of resistance and transformation. Women have been challenging the patriarchal structures of religion for centuries, and today that fight continues. Whether through reinterpretations of sacred texts or the reclamation of spiritual authority, women are reshaping religious life. Religion at its core is about connection to the divine and to one another. As we continue to evolve, we must ask ourselves, can we envision a world where religion uplifts all people, regardless of gender? A world where the sacred is not confined to patriarchal boundaries, but is instead a space of true equality. The path to equality is not easy, but history has shown us that change is possible. One belief, one interpretation, one voice at a time.